Hello and welcome back to the classes of Mastering Biology. Let's learn biology in an easier way and make it more fun and interesting. All right. So let us talk about respiration in insects. All right. In the last class, I told you that respiration in insect is known as tracheal respiration. So what is tracheal respiration? When the respiration takes place through spiracles, it is called as tracheal respiration. What are spiracles? Spiracles are small holes which are present on the side of the insect's body. And these spiracles have exactly the same function as our nostrils. All right, they help to breathe in, right? So spiracles help in taking up oxygen-rich air and give out carbon dioxide-rich air. All right, so what is happening then? This is simple breathing, exchange of gases, be it breathing in and breathing out. Similarly, insects breathe in and breathe out through spiracles. All right, so now this oxygen-rich air from here, spiracles, it travels into the tubular system, which is called as the trachea or the tracheal tubes. And this trachea then leads into these air sacs where the gaseous exchange is going to take place. All right. So the gaseous exchange takes place in the air sacs. The oxygen is transported to the body parts from here, and the carbon dioxide rich comes back and it is given out from the spiracles. This is how insects perform tracheal respiration. All right. Now let us proceed to the next part of the lecture, which is the human respiratory system. So let us take a figure of the human respiratory system first. So let us quickly draw the human respiratory system. The human respiratory system begins from the nostrils that leads into the nasal passage. This is the buccal cavity part, all right. And here we have a partition which divides the nasal cavity from the oral cavity. All right. So this is a partition. And then it leads into a tube. This is the voice box, the larynx. This is the bronchi, all right. So see, this is the larynx, the voice box. It has an opening which is called as the glottis, which is kept covered by this cartilaginous flap, which is known as the epiglottis. I'll mark the labelings also. And this part is the windpipe, the tracheae, which have C-shaped or incomplete cartilaginous rings. So the tracheae divides into two bronchi which enters the lung of its own side. This is how. And the lungs rest on a muscular sheet which internally divides our body into two parts, the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. All right. So let us quickly label them. All right. First, I think I'll complete this part first. So let's quickly do this. Then I'll label all the parts for your ease. Now this bronchi divides a number of times to form finer branches, which at the end form or open up into the air sacs known as alveoli. All right. So now let us label these parts. This opening is the nostril. This is the nasal passage. Then this part is the pharynx. All right. Then this is the larynx or the voice box. Then this is the trachea, which is the windpipe. All right. The trachea divides into two parts which are known as bronchi. So we have a left bronchi and a right bronchi, and the bronchi enters the lung of its own side, where it divides and redivides a number of times. This is the primary bronchi. This primary bronchi divides a number of times to form secondary and tertiary bronchi, which further divide into finer tubes which are called as the bronchioles. So as they keep on dividing, the diameter keeps on decreasing of these tubes, and when they are divided into finally bronchioles, they open up into alveoli, which is the place where gaseous exchange is going to take place. So here we cannot show all of this. So we have drawn primary bronchi, and then you can label this as secondary and tertiary bronchi. Then the last one as bronchioles, and finally is the alveoli, the site for gaseous exchange. All right. Now, as I told you that these have C-shaped cartilaginous rings. So, is the C-shaped cartilaginous rings restricted to this part only? No. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings, this, they are present in primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles. Yes. What is the role of these C-shaped cartilaginous rings? Yes. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings prevents trachea from collapsing. They prevent the trachea from collapsing when the air is not present in the respiratory tract. When we are exhaling out, at that time, no air is present in the trachea. So the membranes might get stuck. And for that purpose, C-shaped cartilaginous rings or incomplete cartilaginous rings prevent the trachea from collapsing. All right. I hope you've understood the parts. Now, one by one, we will take up all the parts in detail. So, the first part of the respiratory system of humans is the nose. Nose has two parts, the nostrils and the nasal cavity. Nostrils, as I told you, are pore-like. They are pores through which we breathe in and out. All right. Nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is the space which is partitioned inside. This has a partition in between. All right. And so we say that we have a pair of nostrils leading into their respective nasal cavity, because the nasal cavity is partitioned in between. All right. Now, what does this nasal cavity has? Nasal cavity has two very important things. One is the cilia and one is the mucus, which is secreted by the cells. What are these cilia and mucus doing? They trap the dust particles and germs and prevent their entry into the respiratory tract. All right. So, this is the role of cilia and mucus. What is cilia? Cilia are the hair-like structures. These are hair-like structures. And mucus? Mucus is the sticky substance. Both of these collectively help in filtering the air. All right. Now, one more thing nasal cavity is doing. Nasal cavity, it makes the air warm. And warm means it reaches to the almost to the body temperature before it enters our system. All right. Why the air is getting warm? By the blood circulation in the nose. This makes the air warm in the nasal cavity. So, filtration takes place and the air gets warm. These two things happens in the nasal cavity or the nasal passage. Now, if you look at the diagram that I have drawn, you can see this part. What is this? This part is said to be the palate, the hard palate, which divides our buccal cavity and the nasal cavity. That means it acts as a partition between the two. But see, both these partitions, both these chambers finally meet at this part, which is pharynx. And so we said that pharynx is a common passage to air as well as food. All right. Now, always remember one thing about the positioning. In the front, we have the respiratory tract, that is the trachea, the larynx, and at the back, we have the food pipe. So, it is placed like this. Clear? So, let us proceed to the next part, which is pharynx. What is pharynx? So, this is nose. Then, the second part is pharynx. Pharynx is a common passage to air and water or food. All right. So pharynx is a common passage. Now pharynx is divided into three on the basis of the location. Yes, when the nasal cavity opens into pharynx, it is nasopharynx. When the buccal cavity opens into pharynx, it is buccopharynx or oropharynx. As I told you, oral cavity is the other name, right? And the third one is laryngopharynx. That means the part of pharynx that leads into the larynx. Now quickly let's have a look where I'm talking about the parts. Please look up here. This part that I'm circling, this is one part of pharynx, this is the second part of pharynx, and this is the third part of pharynx. The first part of pharynx, as I told you, is the nasopharynx. The second part is the buccopharynx, and the third part is the laryngopharynx. So I hope I'm clear with the three parts. So these are three parts: nasopharynx, part of pharynx, part of nasal cavity leading into pharynx, then part of buccal cavity leading into pharynx, all right, and ultimately is the part of pharynx. Now it is not leading anywhere, this opens into larynx. So this is the part pharynx. Fine. Let's move to the next part, which is the third part, and that part is called as larynx. Larynx is also known as voice box. Why? Because this is the box where sound production takes place. The sound that we hear is produced from here in the larynx or the voice box. Why? Because the larynx has vocal cords, and when the air passes, the vocal cords vibrate against the walls, creating or producing sound, right? Then what important thing I told you here is that the opening of the larynx is known as glottis, which is kept covered by a cartilaginous flap known as epiglottis. So we have two parts here in the larynx, the glottis and the epiglottis. What is their role? Glottis is the opening to the respiratory tract. That is, it allows the movement of air in the respiratory tract after pharynx. Fine. But you know what? When I told you that the windpipe is present at the front and we have the esophagus at the back, And when we are chewing food, can you tell me how food will decide which opening it has to enter? Because there are two openings. Yes? So at that time, what happens when we are chewing food and when we swallow it, the food causes the closure of this epiglottis. The flap moves down. Epiglottis is a cartilaginous flap. So the flap moves down, closing this opening, which is called as glottis. I hope I am clear till here. Now, the food will automatically be directed in the food pipe. Clear? That is the reason we are often told that we should not speak when we are eating. Because when we speak, the epiglottis will remain open. And when we eat, the epiglottis has to close. And so when we are speaking while eating, the epiglottis does not close completely and the food enters the windpipe instead of in the food pipe. And that's where we choke and we start to cough. All right. So there is a very, very important role of this epiglottis. And this question has been asked number of times, that which structure prevents the passage of food in the windpipe, or what is the importance of larynx beside producing sound. So larynx has this structure which protects the entire respiratory tract from getting choked with food. All right. So this is an important question here in larynx. Now as we move further, let's have a look at the diagram so that we can have a recap. Here we started breathing in from here, and now we've reached in the voice box. The air has now entered the trachea or the windpipe. So the next part, which is the fourth part, is the trachea. I already told you it is known as windpipe. The windpipe has 16 to 20 C-shaped or incomplete cartilaginous rings. All right. It has incomplete or C-shaped cartilaginous rings. And what are these rings doing? Prevent trachea from collapsing when no air is present in the respiratory tract. All right. So this is the function of the trachea. And now the trachea divides into two bronchi, left and right. Each bronchi will enter the lung of its own side. That is, the left bronchi will enter the left lung and the right bronchi will enter the right lung. All right. So, this bronchi then further divides into bronchi divides. Now again, I am not mentioning the primary bronchi will divide into secondary, then into tertiary, and then into bronchioles. I'm straight away writing bronchi divides and redivides a number of times ultimately forming bronchioles. Ultimately forming bronchioles. All right. So I hope this part is clear to you. Next, when we move on, the bronchioles. All right. So I think I'll write it as the next part only, the fifth one. Okay. This has to be the sixth one. I want you to make bronchi and bronchioles as the fifth part. All right. So the sixth part is the alveoli. Alveoli has the characteristic features. Remember, in the beginning of the respiratory surface has following characteristic feature. In the beginning of the lecture, previous lecture, I discussed that it should be thin and moist, it should be permeable, richly supplied with blood vessels, it should have a large surface area. So these characteristics now come up into existence, which is in alveoli. So this is the main respiratory surface for gaseous exchange. And gaseous exchange is taking place by the process of diffusion. So gaseous exchange is taking place by the process of diffusion. So you have to remember this thing. Gaseous exchange will happen by the process of diffusion here. This is said to be the structural and functional unit of lungs. So alveoli are the structural and functional unit of lungs where the gaseous exchange is going to take place. Am I clear with here? Now in total, if I say collectively in both our lungs, we have about 300 million alveoli in both the lungs. All right. Now, what are lungs? Okay, I'll talk about lungs after this. But before that, the structures, the bronchi. Now, the primary bronchi I told you is entering into the lungs. It divides and redivides into secondary and tertiary bronchi. Then bronchioles, which open up into the alveolar ducts, the tubes, and the alveoli. They are collectively present in lungs. That is, our lungs comprises of these structures. The primary bronchi divides, the trachea divides into two primary bronchi, entering the lung of its own side. Then inside, the moment it enters, it divides and redivides to form secondary and tertiary bronchi. Then they have bronchioles. Then finally the alveolar ducts and the alveoli. So let us have a look at the next structure, which is the lungs. The seventh part is the lungs. What are lungs? Lungs are paired organs covered with membranes. Okay, now write the name. Pleural membranes. Covered with pleural membranes. All right. And these already have the secondary and the tertiary bronchi, the bronchioles, the alveolar duct, and the alveoli. All right. So if I have to define lungs, Paired organs, or you can add on, they are muscular bags which hold the alveoli for the purpose of gaseous exchange. All right. Now, the eighth part is the diaphragm. When I say the diaphragm, diaphragm is a thick muscular sheet which divides the body internally into thorax or the thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity. So these are the two cavities which are present. All right. And these two cavities have been formed because of the presence of this diaphragm. Children, role of diaphragm is not only to divide the body internally, but it definitely has to do something with respiration. And that I will explain you when I take the steps of respiration in the next class. So for now, you need to revise this content. You need to go through this, and quickly I'll just show you the diagram and we'll see that we've covered all the parts in the picture here. So we talked about the nostrils, all right, and the nasal passage or the nasal cavity which collectively form the nose. That leads into the next part, which was pharynx, then larynx, then trachea, then primary bronchi, secondary, tertiary bronchioles. We've talked about alveoli, which are the structural and functional unit of the respiratory system, the lungs. All right. And yes, we have missed out lungs, the labeling here. You can mention the left lung and the right lung. This is the right lung and this one is the left lung. So you can mark the labeling here also. And this structure is known as diaphragm. Children, this question is very, very important. When I will explain you how respiration is happening in our body, I'll definitely talk about diaphragm again. And yes, one question as a general science question to you. Do you know how your lungs are kept protected? Your lungs are kept protected within the rib cage. At the back, the protection shield is the vertebral column, and in the front, we have sternum and the sternum or the breastbone. So here I want you to make a note of this too, how the lungs are kept protected besides the membrane. So they are protected by rib cage, vertebral column at the back, and sternum, which is the breastbone or the chest bone at front. So this is how the visceral organ has a foolproof protection, closing it in a compact cage, which is the rib cage. All right. So this is all about the structure part of the human respiratory system. We shall definitely talk about the steps of respiration, where we will talk about there are 4 steps of respiration, and I will make a separate video for that. Till then, you just keep on revising and please ask your doubts in the comment box. Thank you for today. Have a nice day.